Okay, everybody, it's 8:35, so we're going to get started. Will the clerk please call the roll? Yes.
Bell. Here. Curran.
Here.
Freeling.
Present.
Harrison.
Here.
Hinkleman.
Here.
Majeri.
Here.
Meeks.
Here.
Scott.
Here.
Ballraff.
Here.
Werfel.
Here.
Yarborough.
She's in the hallway.
Elliott.
Here.
Yarborough. Okay. Elliott.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 12 present.
Thank you. Minutes from the 26th of August, apparently. Any changes to those? They were emailed out a while ago. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Moved by Volrath. Is there support? Supported by Meeks. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Mr. Administrator?
So members of the board, we have a couple of guests today to provide updates to the board. We're going to start with an update from Mr. Al Pashilka and the Connexus Group.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Administrator Doucette. Board of Commissioners, great to see you all again. Commissioner Meeks must have enjoyed this presentation so much that he wanted to hear it again. So he's a member of the Connexus board. I want to thank Don and Commissioner Yarborough for serving on the board. So I'm going to give you a brief government affairs update that I gave our board and also provide you some labor market information. The labor market piece we've been doing for the last couple of years. So every 4 to 6 weeks, we get data, not only from the state and federal government, but we've got about 40 different sources that we look at and some interesting information. We share that with state lawmakers, with the media, with the public. And somebody asked this week, well, why wouldn't we share it with the county officials? So Brian, if this is something you're interested in, there's an 11-page report in your packet. I'll give you some of the highlights of that. And I think we all know we're facing a pretty significant labor shortage, no matter what sector you're in. So let me start with the government update and really a thank you to the Berrien County Board and Director Fetty. We got involved in this metropolitan statistical area issue about a year ago. Nobody really quite understood it. We knew it was important. We decided to get involved in it. We created a white paper. We partnered with some other organizations. We came to Brian and said, hey, we think this is significant for Berrien County. The federal government wanted to remove Berrien County, Midland, Jackson, some of the smaller areas in Michigan from MSAs. Eventually, that could impact your federal funding. It definitely would impact the labor market data that we get at Connexus and use for programming and use for public dissemination as well. So all of that would have went away if the federal government had changed the rules. We decided to fight back. What the heck, right? And we did. And even my boss said, we know this is a long shot, but kudos to our congressional delegation. Congressman Upton got some of his folks involved in Jackson and Midland and some of those other markets. But really kudos to Senator Peters and his staff. We met with Senator Peters and Senator Peters agreed to actually drop a piece of legislation stopping what the Office of Management and Budget wanted to do, protecting smaller and rural communities. And when he dropped that budget or dropped that bill, they stopped and said, okay, we don't want to pursue this. So it's something we'll keep our eye on. You never know. The federal government might pop up in 4 or 5 years and try to do this again, but we were successful. So thank you to the board for passing the resolution of support. We included that in the public comments and some of the information. On the federal and state side, I'll just give you a brief kind of update on some spending and some budget stuff. The federal government's got some very big choices coming up. So by the end of the month, they have to pass a continuing resolution and they've got to extend the debt ceiling. So that's got to happen by October 1st. So there's a lot of proposals out there for spending at the federal government level. But the first thing that they've really got to do is, they have not passed a budget since 2006. So the federal government has been operating on a series of continuing resolutions for the past 15 years. There's been no budget. So they've got another one with a deadline coming up at the end. They've got a number of spending packages out there. One is the $1.2 trillion for infrastructure, then another $3.5 trillion for human infrastructure, and another $6 trillion. God, I keep messing this up because I'm not used to talking in T's. I'm used to talking in B's and M's, and these are now T's, all these bills. So $1 trillion, so there could be up to nearly 11 trillion in spending over the next 30 to 60 days. They're still arguing about it. So we know the one package did pass in the United States Senate, 69 to 30. It's now sitting in the House. The House wants to pass both bills together. So it's kind of stuck there for now. For our purposes, there is $100 million in workforce development there in that $3.5 trillion package. But there's a lot of other concerns, absolutely on the fiscal side, that folks aren't talking about. On the state budget side, good news, I was in Lansing on Tuesday. The two sides, the governor's office and the legislature, were at the table. They were staying at the table. They announced last night they do have a state budget. So I look for them to pass that next Tuesday. They'll probably run that before they all go to Mackinac, or some of them go to Mackinac. But the package does not spend all the money. So the state has about $8 billion in surplus. So $7 billion of that is federal money. About $1 billion of that is general fund from the state. What they're going to propose doing is some of that will be used for infrastructure. So Commissioner Freeling, you might want to keep an eye on any broadband money that might be in there. I think there will be some in that $8 billion that's going to move over the course of 4 supplementals. The first one will be coming at the end of October or early November. There's possibly some money for local municipalities to do some work as well on infrastructure, but they'll pass what's called the skinny budget of more than $60 billion next week. And then they'll have about $8 billion left to spend that they'll spend over the course of the next 12 months. And some of those dollars can actually bleed into the next year. So some of those federal dollars aren't as restricted, and they do have a little bit longer life to them. So let me get to the labor market stuff, because that's what's keeping us all up at night. So in your packet, the number that we're really concerned about, and everybody likes to talk about the unemployment rate. What I'm going to explain to you today is the unemployment rate is not as important as the size of the labor force. So if you look at Berrien County's unemployment rate, it's 5.7%. And you might think, that's not that bad. Historically, if you look at 5.7%, 5%, that's not bad. That's pretty good. However, the thing that we've been looking at in the course of the pandemic has been the size of the labor market. Are people retiring early? Are they quitting? Are they becoming one-income families? Are they not back in the labor force for whatever reason? So the first 9 months of COVID, we looked at it and it was about the same, about 131,000 in the Tri-County area, Berrien, Cass, Van Buren. We're like, okay, good. The last 9 months, it's fallen off the cliff. We've been between 4,200 and 5,500 lower. So that impacts every sector of the economy if more people aren't working. So as we look at the sectors, manufacturing is down about 9.8%. Healthcare is down about 7%. The big area, everybody in this room has seen it. If you've gone to a restaurant, if you've gone even to a drive-through, geez, Culver's had a sign up saying, due to the labor crisis, your burger may take longer. So what we're seeing is a 23.3% drop in leisure and hospitality employment. So a lot of those folks are really struggling, and you've seen less hours. Maybe they're not open as much. From a training perspective, we find it difficult right now to even get people in the door for training when they know there's opportunities. So we've expanded some apprenticeship opportunities. We're now offering pharmacy technicians. We've always had CNAs. We've had some pre-construction stuff that we do down at Michigan Works. We're expanding all of that and trying to reach out and find as many folks as we can to get them trained up, because we know that there's jobs available. So there's a ton of work out there. If you look statewide, Michigan, we're down about 200,000 people. So that's significant. So there's a significant drop. And we're all struggling with it. So with that, I know you've got other business. I don't want
Hey,
to take up too much of your time.
when you say that as statewide, that we're down 200,000,
Size of the labor force.
yeah. So is there any speculation on what the timeline is to see those people re-enter the labor force?
Here's the issue, Brian, and we've talked about it at Connexus, and I know some other folks have too. Michigan is an aging state. We've seen a smaller population growth. Some of this is just demographics that some folks are just timing out. They've decided, and there's even folks, old farts like me, they get in their early 60s and they start looking at their 401k and going, do I need to go back? So we really need to have a concerted effort, work with schools, our career technical education, those types of initiatives to get people into the workforce successfully. And I think there's ways that we can do that. And I think as we look forward a little bit, I mean, it's not going to be Connexus solving the workforce issues. It's going to be all of us. So it's the schools, community colleges, the local governments, all of us coming together to make sure that we get kids trained and in the right areas. There's some data out there that says, 3/4 of our kids want to go to college, but only half do. Only 30% get a 4-year degree. So my question is, what happens to the other 70% of kids that are out there? And they should be available for training. And I know President Harrison knows all about those issues as well, so.
So Al, with the extra money in Lansing, is there any discussion going on about investing, creating some incentives for people to go back into training to gear up to take some of those critical jobs here in the state?
There is. So there is that component to it. A lot of it, I think there's a fear, Commissioner, that this is really one-time money. So with one-time money, you should probably use it for capital or some sort of infrastructure or paying down debt. I mean, those are all good uses of one-time money. So there'll be big debates in Lansing over how to spend that. I think the fact that they haven't spent it yet shows that there's not agreement on how they really want to use it. So that means all of us need to stay engaged and nudge our state lawmakers when we can.
Al, has Connexus been given any thoughts at all about to push for like trade schools in Berrien? Because I think that is hugely important. I know I was involved in the building trades and I still to this day regret not taking welding classes in high school. Always want to do that, but I'm just saying, I mean, is there any push for that?
I'll be frank, Commissioner. We've had those discussions. They weren't exactly well received, and I'll take the blame for that. Maybe we got a little bit pushy, but we do need to rally around this whole notion of career and technical education. Berrien County does it much differently than other areas of the state. In Van Buren County, they've got a centralized tech center where students all come to. They've got 29 different vocational programs. It is a really, really well done. In Berrien County, we have PA 56, where we kind of share programs, and students are supposed to get different places with scheduling, transportation. What we've seen is whatever school you're in, those are the voc tech programs you're in. You're probably not going to Coloma for machine tool. A lot of Coloma Waterville kids do, but we're not seeing maybe kids from Benton Harbor or other areas get to Coloma and have that training. That's an ongoing discussion. That's one we're going to continue to have. I think it's really important going forward. How can we better use perhaps the Hansen Center at Lake Michigan College? There's also a tech center facility down at SMC in Niles. So there may be a way that without building and passing a big millage, maybe there's a way that we can cooperatively use those facilities. Those are discussions we're going to continue to have with the school folks. I think they thought we were kind of getting in their business a little bit. I have a tendency to do that sometimes. So I'll take the blame for that. And maybe we need to message that a little bit better.
Maybe then Dave.
Yes, I am a member of the Connexus board, And the things that you're naming have been done here before with our schools, you know, when we were in the DSEG and all of that. And so I think we know how, and I think the need has come again. And I must say that we just opened a charter school through Michigan Works. We have youth build and all those things, so that may be something we should be concentrating on, because I've always thought everybody does not want to be a doctor. We need plumbers and electricians and all the kinds of things that somehow there are young people that know how to do that. But with training, they would, you know, could be a lifetime thing. And so that's something we need to really look at hard.
Yeah, you're exact. Mamie and I have been around a long time, so I've known Mamie since she was on the school board back in Benton Harbor. So, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And two of the hottest jobs out there right now, plumbers and HVAC folks.
Yeah.
Plumbers and HVAC folks are going to have the biggest need coming up over the next 2 to 5 years. So,
thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I just want to say, we toured a couple years ago, probably 2 or 3, but the Van Buren County Center up there is really nice. They've got a technical center, their auto shop, machine shop, and things are just, you know,
Welding.
state of the art. It's,
Yeah.
I can't mention them all.
Yeah.
And they had kids coming from all over Van Buren County to the school.
So again, my offer to you folks is, you know, we do these labor market meetings every 4 to 6 weeks. We can definitely, if someone has an interest in it and wants to be included, my number is in here. I'm pretty easy to find, or let Brian know. We'd love to include you if that's something that you're interested in. But again, thanks for your time. Thanks for the support on the MSA. That really was a big deal, you guys. I mean, that is millions of dollars that our county would have lost if we didn't come together and push back. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We have the harbor update with Dan Fetty. Committees need to convene at 9:15. So we've got about 20 minutes to finish up in here. Dan, go ahead.
I will be as quick as possible then, assuming I can figure out how to work our technology here. There we go. I think I got it, Brian. Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I think you'll probably recall that for about 2 years or so, the county has been working with the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission and the Office of the Great Lakes on a fairly extensive study of the St. Joe Commercial Harbor and the recreational portion of the St. Joe River. This was funded through the Office of the Great Lakes, a Sea Grant program, and they sent down a number of technical staff assistants to hold a variety of meetings throughout the community over a 2 or 3 year period to develop this long-term strategy for what can be done with the commercial harbor and the adjacent land development opportunities, economic development opportunities, and so forth. I think that a number of you probably attended some of these sessions at one point or another. They were called charrette sessions, these planning sessions. And ultimately, it resulted in a complete study that was released to the public. I think it was in January of 2020. And it was an ambitious study that talked about landside development, water development, recreational opportunities, commercial opportunities, and so forth. But one of the things that came about as a result of this study was the recognition that there is no government entity or collective community entity that has responsibilities for managing this waterway. It used to be the case that Berrien County had a harbor authority, as you all recall, and we kind of managed the dredging activities and some of the other recreational activities within the harbor. We disbanded that harbor authority, I believe, around 2010, 2011, I think it was. And since that time, there's been no local entity that's been involved in managing waterway activities or harbor activities. And this is a significant problem because as much as the study produced some pretty ambitious development goals, if we don't do the nuts and bolts of managing the waterway, none of those development goals really matter in the long run. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is what we've been doing with local communities over the last couple of months to try to create a new structure of managing the activities within the commercial harbor and recreational waterway. But in summary, this was the area that was studied. Basically, Benton Harbor, St. Joe, and a portion of St. Joe Township down in the bottom part of that picture. It didn't extend beyond that for obvious reasons. I mean, where do you draw the line when you're looking at waterways development? You have to do it somewhere, so we drew the line at the area that had the largest population of recreational and commercial waterway usage. Again, this is the delineation of the communities. You have St. Joe, you have Benton Harbor, and a small amount of St. Joe Township that were associated in that study area. In late January of 2020, St. Joe, Benton Harbor, St. Joe Township had a joint meeting out at LMC to discuss possible ways to move forward with a harbor management organization comprised of the three communities. And at the conclusion of that meeting, the three communities agreed that they would appoint a working group to discuss various legal frameworks through which they could cooperate on a permanent basis for harbor maintenance purposes. And about a month later, COVID hit, and that entire discussion got delayed for about a year. In May of this year, working with the three communities, my staff began hosting meetings with these three communities to talk about this process and see if we could start moving it forward again. We met beginning in May all the way through August. And what came out of that was a conclusion or a recommendation by the members of these three communities, a memorandum of recommendation to the governing bodies of St. Joe, Benton Harbor, St. Joe Township to create a harbor authority under something called Public Act 7 of 1967, which is the Urban Cooperation Act. This is an act that allows communities to formally share governmental power and to vest that shared power in a joint board that'll administer those powers. I know the chair has been involved in some of these projects over the years. They did look at things like trying to do a joint planning body, a joint advisory board, and the conclusion was we're really not concerned about the planning aspects of what goes on in these communities. They all have their own planning commissions. They all have their own construction boards of appeals and so forth. They all run their own physical development projects. We're more concerned about what's actually happening with the waterway itself, and if it's being maintained, if it's being kept at navigational depths, and so on and so forth. And for that purpose, we really thought that a harbor authority rather than a planning commission was the way to go. There are various pros and cons of these I know that you guys have seen these slides before, so I'm not going to belabor the point, but essentially what it comes down to is the harbor authority would allow these communities to basically say, we're going to share the powers of dredging, we're going to share the powers of siting, say, water taxi stops, we're going to share the powers of providing for uniform maritime safety standards for marina development, things like this. And then we'll place that within this body, this board of representatives of the elected governments, and they can then administer these powers. Now, I'll give you a few boring but specific examples of one of the challenges we're facing down here. The federal government maintains this commercial harbor for us. Every year they provide money to dredge it, to ensure that commercial shipping comes into this harbor. You can walk down there, drive down there today and see aggregate material stacked all over the commercial docks. That material is being used to construct the roads that are being built right now in Benton Harbor and the 94 interchange with 31. All of that material comes in here has reduced the road construction costs of the region by about 50% because it's so much cheaper to bring this stuff in by harbor. The concern is that if we don't continually push the federal government to maintain this harbor on our behalf, we'll lose designation, we'll lose the shipping, and then the material costs of all this construction that's going on will go up, will skyrocket. Additionally, because the federal government has to maintain this harbor for commercial purposes, the recreational community gets to piggyback on it, so to speak. We don't have to do a lot of recreational dredging. Whereas in places like, Brian's former bailiwick, I mean, this is a huge challenge every year, is trying to figure out how to dredge that marina area. Douglas Saugatuck has the same problems. Here, we get a free ride almost on the federal dredging. The problem is you have to have a local sponsor for the federal dredging. And when the county got out of the business, there was no longer a local sponsor. Fortunately, the staff at City of St. Joe picked up that process and ran with it for a few years, but they would like to be out of that and not have it managed solely by St. Joe, since it's a community problem or a community action to begin with. So dredging would be number one. It should be handled by a joint body that has responsibilities to the three communities. Number two would be recreational waterways management. We used to hold the permits for recreational dredging. We don't hold those anymore. So if you wanted to dredge the recreational waterway, there's no one capable of doing it right now. There's no permit for it. No individual community is going to want to acquire those permits. It made more sense to say, let's create an authority that can apply for and manage those permits in the event that recreational dredging is necessary again in the future, which it will be as the water levels drop. A third aspect of this, I just was talking to a member of one of the public safety departments in the region, and they were applying for grant funding for maritime water rescue vehicles. And the grantor demanded to see the maritime safety plan for the St. Joe River. Well, guess what? We don't have a consolidated maritime safety plan. You know, the Coast Guard handles portions of it. Our EOC through the Sheriff's Department handles portions of it, but there is no consolidated maritime safety plan. The idea is that a joint harbor authority could certainly contract for the creation of that plan and hold that plan for the purposes of grant funding and other coordinated activities. So it's a long way of saying the recommendation is out there that a joint harbor authority be created under Public Act 7. I have taken, on behalf of this working group, I have taken that to the St. Joe City Commission, and by resolution, they agreed to support this. I've taken it to the St. Joe Charter Township Board of Trustees, and by resolution, they have agreed to support it. And just last week, I was at the Benton Harbor Public Safety Committee briefing them on it, and I believe that it'll be on the agenda of the Benton Harbor City Commission here in the coming weeks for their support as well. If all three communities support this by resolution, at that point, the lawyers will get involved and they'll start drafting the articles of incorporation for this harbor authority. A key point is that Berrien County is not being asked to be a member of this authority. This is an authority of the three communities themselves, which is what we've been encouraging all along, some ownership and some responsibility amongst the three communities to manage this. What we have offered, however, knowing that this authority will not have staff, expertise, or experience in these matters, whereas we do, we have offered to provide at least 2 years of staffing to this authority once it's created. So we will help them with the applications for permits. We will help them with the federal applications for funding. We will help provide the oversight of the dredging if necessary. We will help them develop the maritime safety plan if necessary. But it's something that we feel, because my department has been involved in it, and a number of departments in this county have been involved in it over the years, it's something we feel it's important, if this authority is created, that we provide the staffing so it can get its legs under it, at least for a 2-year period of time until we get through a couple of the federal dredge cycles. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying we're moving forward with this. This is a good thing for the community. I'm hopeful that all the communities will pass this, and by next year, when the federal dredging program begins, this body will be in place to help manage that.
So just as a follow-up, having lived for a decade under recreational harbor status, to get dredging done, typically it was done via special assessment. And the special assessment was one of the most complex things I've ever worked on, because it was literally 1,200 slips, 1,200 individual parcels being pulled into a special assessment. Typically with special assessments, you do it over a 3 to 5 year period or longer, depending on the improvement. We did 3 years. Came in, did the dredging. By the 3rd year of the special assessment, the end of the term, it was time to dredge again. So what Dan just said, I just can't underscore how critical it is that maintaining this federal funding is of such benefit to everyone that's using that harbor. So thanks.
And we've been very lucky over the years to have the support of Upton's office. Al was involved in this for years. He was our guy to go to. And Stabenow and Peter's office have also been very supportive of it. So I'm confident we'll continue to keep the money rolling in. But this is an important element in making that happen.
Jim.
Thank you, Mac. Dan, I remember early on when we were doing the dredging and whatnot, that has not been an issue since because of the high water levels.
Yeah, exactly.
And now all of a sudden they're looking at it because it needs to be dredged here pretty soon. Is that the issue?
Yeah, there's a couple things here. First of all, the commercial harbor has continued to be dredged during that period of time, even at high water levels, because the silting every year, causes a little bit of loss of depth. So the federal harbor has been dredged during that time. The recreational areas of the river have not been dredged.
And the city of St. Joe has been doing that?
City of St. Joe has assisted in that, and we've been providing help to
Yeah,
St.
you've
Joe
been assisting because of your background and knowledge. Okay,
and
thank
John
you.
Hodgson, the city manager, knows this stuff very well, and he's done a great job with it. But we've been helping with that. Now, on the recreational side, no, there's been no dredging for a number of years, and it's because we've had historically high water levels. Those water levels have leveled off. They're dropping a little bit right now. It's a cycle. They will come back down, and we'll be dealing with this issue at some point. I mean, erosion has been the big problem over the last 8 years, and 5 or 6 years from now, dredging is going to be the issue again. That's just the nature of it.
Yes, ma'am.
So they're not asking for any funding?
Nope.
From Berrien County, other than staffing?
That's right.
And how much staff time do you anticipate that taking? Is it a full-time person? What is that gonna take?
I expect it's probably going to be about as much time we spent on the Berrien County Harbor Authority, and maybe 10% of the total staff time maximum. It goes in spells. In the wintertime, you're real busy because that's when all the preparation comes. And then by the summer, it kind of cools off a little bit. But I'd be surprised if it amounted to more than 10% of our staff time total.
Sir,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you. I was a member of the St. Joseph Harbor Authority, and I'm so thankful to see Berrien County continue to be involved in this. And this is what I say about communities. They have a room that's full of everything that's ever been done, the studies with the computer. I know they need help, and there are big dollars in the federal government to keep harbors. And they said, we don't ever want to lose this being a harbor. You can't get it back, and it needs to happen. One thing I wonder about Berrien Hills Country Club, where that property is, St. Joe River, is that city of St. Joe Township? You know, will those landowners have any say in what happens in the water?
I'm sorry. The Berrien Hills Country Club is located in St. Joe Township.
Okay.
Okay. And their riparian rights extend to the middle of the river, after which it becomes city of St. Joe jurisdiction. And that kind of gets to the problem that we deal with, is that if you want to dredge a portion of the river and it's going to be done only by a local government, then you have to determine, is it in say Benton Harbor's riparian area, or is it in St. Joe's riparian area? It doesn't make a lot of sense because it's all one body of water that you have to manage. To the bigger issue, though, is that we're not proposing having this kind of harbor district extend all the way down to Berrien Hills. It's just too far upriver. Nevertheless, if what happens with this 3-body harbor authority turns out to be beneficial for recreational waterways management, there's nothing to say that other communities upriver of that can't come in and join this authority at some point.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of the long-term hope, is that other communities, Benton Township, maybe even parts of Sodus, Royalton, might want to, over time, become a part of this process.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Thank you very much, everyone.
Well, one thing, as this starts to take shape, give some thought, if you would, to a cost for those administrative services and staffing. That support function, if we didn't provide it, it would have to be provided by some other entity on a fee basis. So give some thought to what the numbers are for us to break even.
Yeah, and we have considered that. I think the offer has been that we'll do it for free initially to make this work for them. But if they want ongoing support from the county, obviously, like we do with every other community, we would levy some kind of administrative costing for that.
That'll need to be baked into the intergovernmental agreement also, as you know.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We have about 4 minutes. If anyone has any comment they wish to make during this segment of our meeting, those are limited to 2 minutes per person. So that means if 2 people talk each for 2 minutes, then we're going to have to break for our committees, which start at 9:15. Does anyone have anything they wish to say? If so, please come up, tell us your name and what community you live in.
Mark Anderson, Lake Charter Township.
Thank you.
Yeah, on the no authority over health orders matter that was in the Palladium, this strikes me more as censorship of Ezra Scott and Julie Werfel in terms of their opinions on the mandatory health order from the health department over the K through 12 schools. Simply to have a vote of no confidence is really just sort of a sense of how they feel about this matter. And it just sounds like their views are being squelched under cover of the law. And I'd like to hear what their views are in terms of resolutions rescinding support for the health department's handling of this matter. But it seems like that's being buried. And so I'm not sensing a lot of openness here in the county government. It seems like damage control or just squelching their opinions. And this happens amid, of course, the health department issuing these orders on the basis of a PCR test. How many times do we have to say this? That is inherently unreliable when we hear 200 cases per 100,000, 300 cases per 100,000. A lot of those could be fictitious cases. It might only be 50 real ones. There's so many false positives. We don't hear about viral loads, and we don't hear about any other qualifying statements. All the cases are assumed to be of equal validity and equal severity. And that simply cannot be the case, as Dr. Peter McCullough recently clarified at a Berrien Springs appearance. So there's a lot of falsehoods, a lot of presumptions going on, but that's basically what I wanted to clarify on the basis of what the Palladium has been reporting, or some might say misreporting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard? Yes, sir. Please tell us your name and what community you're from.
Zach Letcher, Village of Stevensville. We showed up a week ago to tell you all what our rights are. We, the people, feel that you did not hear us. You denied. In the Herald Palladium, you denied what we had to say, and you continued to support unconstitutional actions. You're not leaving we the people any choice. You're backing us into a corner. And I told you before, we will take our rights. I agree with the last gentleman. It seems like a underhanded, concerted effort to usurp authority that doesn't belong to you and continue along with unconstitutional charades. You hired Courtney Davis, you fired Courtney Davis. There's other things that you can do, get it done. Because I'm telling you, we're not asking for our rights, we're demanding them. You took an oath to this, the United States Constitution, and to we the people. We're gonna follow the money, and we're gonna find what's going on. We know Whitmer was here last week, and I told you, we won't rest, and we won't. We want everyone to be held accountable who is participating in this. By a quick show of hands, can I see who is against Courtney Davis and her unconstitutional mandate?
Sir, you have about 30 seconds left. This is your
You're
opportunity.
taking my 30 seconds. By a show of hands, can I see
No.
who is for Courtney Davis and her mandate?
It doesn't work that way. If you want to make a comment, you have 2 minutes. You're wasting that time right now.
Sir, you work for me. Okay? I would like a show of hands to see where people stand, because last time in your speeches, you did a lot of hula hoops and grandstanding and virtue signaling instead of cutting to the chase.
Your
So,
time is up. Thank
Great.
you. Okay, folks, we got to be in committee in 1 minute. We'll reconvene here at 10:30. This meeting's adjourned.
Signature.
Super nice.
We're 2 minutes. But today we had to, because we have to get to our committee meetings.